Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Steen, and today I'm inviting Dr. Corinne Erickson onto the pod. I was recently on her podcast. I loved our conversation together. We felt very aligned in terms of looking at fitness, wellness, nutrition, and even skin health in a holistic way, meaning it's not just in a silo, right? We have to look at all of the things. They all link together. They all play together in order to help us optimize our health. Dr. Erickson is a board certified dermatologist and the founder of Georgia Skin Specialists and Clear Aesthetics. With more than 15 years experience, she specializes in the connection between hormones and skin health, helping women navigate skin and hair changes in perimenopause and menopause. Have you had skin and hair changes? We're going to ask her all about this today because I definitely have had my share. And I'm very curious to know the right things to do in order to reverse those changes. She is a Menopause Society Certified Practitioner, and very few dermatologists sit on that menopause board. So that is amazing. She's also an integrative dermatology fellow, bringing together dermatology, hormone science, and lifestyle medicine in her approach to care. Sounds like an amazing combination of skills. Let's welcome Dr. Corinne to the podcast. I'm so happy that you are joining me now on the podcast. If you haven't caught the other one, folks, I was a guest on Dr. Erickson's podcast a few weeks ago. So I'll be sure to link that in the show notes below so you can listen to that one as well. But we've gotten to know each other a little bit. And I was just telling the audience that I'm very aligned with your approach of a holistic approach, kind of looking at all of the things, right? It's not just skincare in a silo, it's looking at all of the things together. So welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
I'm curious what you feel like you are on a mission to do. Like you are now on social media, or maybe not now, but you have been, but getting larger in your reach to people. So what is your main mission? What do you hope to do?
That's a great question, Tracy. I think the biggest mission for me as a board certified dermatologist who's also certified in Menopause Society certified, but also is a 45-year-old woman, is I want women especially to understand that taking care of their skin and looking at their skin is not just an aesthetic mission.
Mm.
The wrinkles are not just cosmetic signs, that our skin is our largest organ. And as it changes with us as we age, it is sending us some very strong messages that we see in the mirror every day. And those messages are telling us that things are changing inside our bodies. And while no one is going to have significant health problems over a wrinkle, maybe that shift in our collagen production, in our elasticity, is giving us some early cues that there are changes happening within us that we should start paying attention to. So
Mm-hmm.
it's to shift the messaging around skin health from aesthetics and cosmetics into more of one of how are all of our organs working together? What is our skin telling us? Let's talk about vitality rather than vanity in the skin space.
I love that. Vitality instead of vanity. Because one of the questions I am going to ask you, not right now, but in a little bit, is there are so many medical procedures. Of course, a lot of people are having them, things like Botox and dermablations and different things like that. I'd love to have that conversation about the mental side of that, not just the
Mhm.
exterior, physiological side of that. So we'll get to that. But talk to us about how you came to sit on the Menopause Society. I think that's fantastic because, as I've read, there are not a lot of dermatologists who are, but it's really important that you have a voice in there. So, how did that all happen?
Well, it is really important. And it truly started when I was in a patient room taking care of a woman who was in her 60s. And she said, Dr. Erickson, how do you feel about me putting my vaginal estrogen cream on my face?
Right, right.
And as it happens, I said, you know what? That's a fascinating question. I don't have an answer for you right now. This was about 2 years ago. I'm going to read about this. And so I started reading about it and looking at the clinical data behind putting estrogen on the face, which led to the question of how is our hormone shift in midlife contributing to skin aging and cellular aging, which
Mhm.
then led me into another deep dive. And I said, you know what? I can't continue practicing dermatology in this midlife space without knowing more about menopause and how our hormones are impacting us. And so it just became this passion project that has completely led to what I'm calling, Dr. Erickson 2.0. It's the next stage in my career as a dermatologist, really supporting women through these hormonal shifts and through the hormonal transitions that are impacting our skin and our overall health.
Well, since you've brought it up, let us go into this conversation now about vaginal estrogen on the face. What did you find in your research?
So, what I found is that there are studies that some of them go back into the 1990s before the WHI got published. So, some of the data is older, but it is still data. And what it showed predominantly supported in small cohorts for up to 6 months that using topical estradiol at 0.01%, which in the United States is the concentration percentage that's FDA approved for use vaginally to help with local hormone shifts, that did show benefits in collagen production, in skin thickness, in reduction of wrinkles, and in hydration of the skin. Additionally, there were studies that looked at estriol, which is also a type of estrogen produced by the body. It's actually the predominant estrogen that our bodies produce during pregnancy. Estriol is not as biologically active as estradiol, but there have been studies looking at estriol at 0.1% and 0.3% for impact on skin health. And while the data hasn't been as consistent with showing the impact, it has supported that estriol formulations have helped the skin thickness, hydration, and wrinkle reduction as well. And I think it's an opportunity, right? It's not an instead of sunscreen. It's not an instead of retinols, but it's taking ownership and agency over this intrinsic aging process with our skin that we've been told for years, oh, it's genetic. This is just written in your code. There's nothing you can do about it. But when we start understanding the hormones and understanding how they do interplay in the skin, that we have estrogen receptors everywhere that are active, as our systemic estrogen levels go down, by giving the skin back what it needs, whether it's topical or internally, we have an opportunity for improvement. And I think that's a really empowering message.
Hmm. Hmm. What if we are opting not to take menopause hormone therapy? So we're not maybe systemically ingesting or not ingesting, but we're not using systemic hormones. Is there any hope for the skin once we really lose all of that estrogen and we're not supplementing with it?
Absolutely, because hormones are only one piece of the aging puzzle,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
You
Yeah.
have intrinsic factors I would talk about as things like your genetics. And we used to say you can't really control your genetics, but in fact, we know that through exercise and diet choices, we can have some impact on our epigenetics, how these
Okay.
genes are expressed. Yes, hormones are a part of it. And if you choose to address those and it's safe for you, then you can. And then there's also time. And time is something that we want more of, right? We don't want to
Yes.
limit the amount of time that's of impact. But a huge part of skin aging is in this extrinsic aging space. And that's where we have our sun exposure. We have pollutants that we're exposed to. We have dietary AGEs that are coming up. We have poor sleep. We have stress levels that are out of control. We have imbalance of cortisol. And while those things do have internal impact, I put them in extrinsic because it's usually a lot of the things that we are in control over that can
Hmm.
move that needle for us. So, no, it's not a lost cause for your skin if you can't take hormones or you choose not to take hormones. It's just another opportunity. But just like hormone therapy is not the panacea for everything when it comes to
Right.
health and aging, it's not the panacea when it comes to helping your skin. It really needs to be considered as part of the larger puzzle. I think it's an important conversation to have. And I think dermatology needs a seat at the table in talking about it.
Hmm. I like that. You said dietary AGEs. Could you explain what that is?
Sure. So advanced glycation end products, which are released by different foods in our diet. And I think of it as caramelization of our skin cells. So as we eat more ultra processed foods, as we eat more red meats, particularly grilled red meats, these foods have very high AGE loads and
Mm.
burdens on our skin cells and have been shown in studies to accelerate skin aging. So, opting for a more plant forward diet where you have generally lower glycemic index foods, a lower inflammatory food group, you're going to reduce the AGE load in your skin. And there have been some skin products that have been produced and promoted to reduce
Mm.
AGEs, as well as some supplements that have been promoted to reduce AGEs in the skin. But it's another example of how what we eat impacts how we look.
It sure does. I think we just don't put as much credence in that as it actually impacts. It just can change so much. I had heart health dietitian Michelle Ruthenstein on the podcast not long ago, and she was talking about how much, of course, it can alter your lipid profile, blood pressure profile. It's just incredible by just shifting your diet, how much of a difference it can make. And I think about some of the interactions that a lot of people might suffer with, things like psoriasis, eczema. Uh, I called it eczema growing up, but I've heard in the States it's eczema. I don't know. What do you call it?
Eczema, but I always say with medical jargon, somebody made it up at one point anyway. So
Yeah.
as long as we can say, understand what we're talking about.
That's right. So a lot of people experience these skin disorders, and so often it can be contributed back to our food consumption. Can you talk about some of the skin disorders or issues that we might see in perimenopause and menopause that could be related to our food consumption?
Absolutely. And I love this question and topic because, in addition to Menopause Society Certified, I did an integrative dermatology training program where I took a deep dive into nutrition and lifestyle
Hmm.
and impact to help. Really, to help take better holistic care of my patients who have chronic inflammatory diseases like
Mhm.
psoriasis and hidradenitis suppurativa and rosacea. And what we see is that there is an uptick in women in these flare-ups of chronic inflammatory conditions around the time of perimenopause. These conditions may have manifested much
Yeah.
earlier, but they do tend to become more difficult to control. And a lot of that has to do with losing some of the anti-inflammatory benefits of estrogen as those levels start to fluctuate. And also with the skin, how that fluctuation of estrogen can impair our skin barrier and make it more susceptible to inflammation. So I talk a lot about creating a lower inflammatory state
Right.
within the body, especially as women enter a stage when our anti-inflammatory defenses may not be as robust as they used to be.
Love it.
And we can really modify that with diet. There are known correlations
Mm.
between certain food types and certain inflammatory skin diseases. An excellent example of this would be alcohol. Actually,
Mm.
unpopular to bring up, but
I'm glad you
alcohol
did.
is incredibly pro-inflammatory. It is a known trigger for exacerbating psoriasis flare-ups and certainly rosacea flare-ups, and it impacts so many different parts of our inflammatory cascade that manifest in different ways. So, you drink alcohol, your sleep quality goes downhill. Well, then your cortisol level rises. It also increases transepidermal water loss. So it's really, you can't just say, well, this has this negative impact because
Mhm.
of one thing. It's also interconnected. So I talk a lot about alcohol reduction or cessation in inflammatory skin diseases. There's also data around gluten consumption in psoriasis that has been shown to really help. About 30% of patients with psoriasis can see significant improvement by eliminating gluten. And these aren't necessarily people who have celiac
Right.
disease. So that's really important. And generally, anything that lowers your insulin resistance
Mm.
and helps you just moderate and maintain healthier glucose levels in your body is going to be beneficial to your overall skin health. So
Mhm.
I do talk a lot about that with my patients.
Yeah, I love all of that. Just seeing the correlations between it. I'm sure you've just seen so many. The alcohol, yeah, I'm glad we're having these conversations about alcohol these days because, 10 years ago, it just wasn't as prevalent. We didn't realize maybe the downside of alcohol so much. But yes, the consumption of it, you lose sleep. And then all of the things that you said on my end of things, I see the inability to really challenge yourself in a workout, to make wise food
Right.
choices, right? To have mental clarity. Like it just impacts everything. And yet it's just so socially acceptable. It makes it a very big challenge, especially I think at this age. We have wine night with the girls, or you're going out for happy hour. It's just so often it seems like it's around drinking. How do you combat that in your own life and circle?
Well, I actually just celebrated 1 year sober a few days
Mm,
ago, which was
congratulations.
a move, thank you, which was a
No.
really important shift for me personally. I realized about a year ago that that sort of society had lied to me about alcohol, and I had bought into it, and I was using it to help control some stress levels and, the after work wind down, and was using it to help me fall asleep after a busy day when my mind was racing. And I just woke up one morning and said, this is really not serving me anymore. And so I'm going to stop serving it to myself. And that has been a really important change in my skin. I have these Visia images, and if you're not familiar, the Visia is this device that really analyzes your skin and shows you everything you really never wanted to see, from red blood vessel dilation to dark spots. And
Yeah.
I'd been lasering my face, I'd been using great skincare, but I was redder, 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 redder.
Mm.
And without really changing anything, without doing any additional laser treatments, about 6 months after removing alcohol from my life, my redness score improved by about 50%. And
Wow.
that was a huge wake up call to me and my own life, and a huge motivator. And it's something that I bring up in a non judgmental way for
Mhm.
especially women in my practice who are working on improving their skin health, whether it's just looking better, like looking like themselves again, or if they're really working to combat an inflammatory skin condition. And I can speak to it with that personal
Mhm.
testimony, which
Mhm.
I think is helpful.
A lot of women, I just recently went to an informational evening at a skincare clinic, and they talked to us a lot about the products that they have and the services that they offer. So this is what got me thinking, and I had these conversations with some friends. I won't go into it all because I did share it on another podcast, and regular listeners will be like, "We heard that already." But anyway, the long and short of it is that we are told that we're aging, we look old, we're wrinkles, we're sagging skin, we have these changes that are happening, and let's reverse that. Let's just make that go away and go back to what we looked like in our 20s and 30s. And for me, it was a troubling thing to hear, because it's like, why do I have to go back to what I did look like? This is like, why can't we own and stand in our power with what we look like here today and still do all of the things where we're taking care of ourselves? But, it just seems like there's this line between, well, I guess you said at the beginning, sort of that vanity and just that authenticity. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that with treatments, things that actually change the look of our face and skin, like procedures and maybe surgeries. What are your thoughts?
Gosh, how much time do you have?
I know it's a big
I have
one.
so many thoughts on this. It is a big one. And so, the first thing that pops into my mind, I'm like, well, thank God I don't act like I did when I'm 25 anymore. Why would I want to look like I did when I'm 25 anymore?
Fair enough.
So I think that there's a couple things to break down here. One is this cultural approach to aesthetics and where we have been and where we are going. The shift that I would love to see embraced more is, instead of for example, creating volume in the cheek where it has never existed, or
Mm.
shifting the position of a structure, or giving someone who's always had thin lips really, really robust, voluminous lips, instead of taking a face and altering it to look like something else. Approaching aesthetics of restoring and softening some changes that have happened over time.
Mhm.
So, we talk a lot, especially in menopause, and this is clinically validated, of not feeling like myself
It's
anymore.
true.
Well, part of not feeling like yourself anymore is that one day waking up and looking in the mirror and feeling like you don't recognize the woman staring back at you. And the concerns that I think are really legitimate to look at are that feeling of how you look tired, you
Mm.
look fatigued, you look burned out and stressed, and the face feels heavy and the skin looks dull. These are the things that I focus on because when you really get into those changes, you're talking about more than aesthetics. You're talking about a woman's well-being
Right.
because she probably is tired. She's probably tired because her estrogen is tanking, her progesterone is off. She's sandwiching between raising children and dealing with aging parents. She's has a marriage that may be stressful at this stage. She has a career that she's probably really working hard on at the same time of having all of these other emotional variables going on. So
Mm.
talking about that tiredness and how can we restore some health and looking like herself through addressing these internal issues that are going on. And then there's also a difference between the types of treatments that you can have. And in my clinical practice and in my aesthetic practice, I focus on treatments that actually make the skin healthier because there are treatments that make the skin healthier. Yes, they make it look better, but I almost think of that as a side effect.
Mm.
Because if we're using skincare products that are hydrating and improving the skin barrier, we're reducing inflammation in the skin. You're less prone to dermatitis and rosacea. You're actually less prone to acne breakouts and infection. Yes, your skin will absolutely look better if your barrier is restored. You'll have your glow back. Is that the main motivation? Maybe for some it is, but I don't mind it if it's making the
Yeah.
skin healthier. Injectables. There's biostimulatory injectables like PLLA that can generate your own collagen production and elastin production. That's improving the skin barrier and skin health. And if it makes you look a little bit more awake and vibrant when you look in the mirror, I'm not mad at that. I think that that can really be a good motivator for people. Jowls bother everyone. And I think
Mm.
it's just because, again, it makes people feel downtrodden. If you look like everything's falling, it gives you sort of a fallen spirit. Anything we can do to uplift a woman, if it also lifts her spirits and maybe lifts her skin a little bit, as long as we're not doing any harm and making her sicker or doing it for the wrong reasons, I think those are good motivators in the
Mhm.
aesthetic space.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're right in that. I think about, again, in my field, in terms of your body composition and what it looks like when you look in the mirror, and how powerful women can feel when they see their own muscle, when, they're carrying a healthy percentage of body fat, when they can one arm row 35-pound dumbbell and do it for reps or whatever. I think those things can definitely improve her confidence,
Yeah,
increase her self-belief, and that helps us to show up in our world a bit differently, doesn't it?
it does. It restores some confidence.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and I think that it's also important to pay attention because we can see the skin. We can see, in a way, bone loss and muscle loss and fat loss. Early stages of sarcopenia
Yeah.
can be more visible in the face before they happen in other places. So it's an opportunity if we, as dermatologists and aesthetic providers, shift our perspective and are open to approaching it like that and not just the pursuit of some unrealistic version of our own aesthetic.
Mm. Yes, well said. What are some things that menopausal women are coming into the clinics for these days? If you could just kind of say, I think these are really important services that you could ask for or get, or this is what I would recommend. for the menopausal woman? What are some of these things that are popular right now?
Well, I would say anything that has to do with the jowls. Nobody likes to see their cheeks falling down closer to their thyroid gland. That's a bummer. And so doing a lot of things to help reduce that. And there's different ways and strategies for it. There's some energy-based modalities that are very comfortable using radio frequency energy or using ultrasound. Ultrasound's more painful. We use radio frequency because I also don't believe in exacerbating stress and pain levels. In
Mm.
dermatology, I like regulating cortisol levels and making an experience more comfortable. I think
Mhm.
no pain, no gain is out and should be. As women, we've endured enough. So radio frequency treatments, we do one called Everest that does a nice job of lifting and tightening, and I call it the volume repositioner in the face, and there's no downtime. You leave looking better than you did walking in because you're a little
Okay.
uplifted. I do some, platysma band neurotoxin because it's not just the mid-face volume loss that contributes to the sagging, it's also the force of pull down in the neck. And in some patients, that's a nice option to help. And then those biostimulatory injectables, Sculptra, PLLA, for example, to more naturally build and restore some volume and collagen over time. So I think jowls are probably the number one thing
Mhm.
that women in the perimenopause, menopause age come in complaining about from a strict aesthetic standpoint. Hair loss would be a close second.
Let's dive into that a little bit because I think that is certainly a concern for so many people wear their hair as their halo, their crown, and it's very important. I have hair extensions because my hair just does not actually, I shouldn't say it does not grow. This last couple of years, it has made a jump. It has made a shift, and maybe it's because I've gone through perimenopause and menopause, and I'm sort of on the other side. I'm not on menopause hormone therapy, but somehow my hair is now healthier than it was 4 or 5 years ago when it was very thin, wispy. And now I'm just love having longer hair. So I got the extensions, but it happens, right? And people see this shift, this thinning. So what are some of the things that can be done for hair loss specifically?
Right. So there are different causes of hair loss
Mm,
in perimenopause and menopause. And I used to call it androgenetic alopecia, which is the
right.
medical term for male patterned thinning or male pattern baldness. But I've really drifted away from that, as a lot of dermatology has. And I call it female patterned hair loss. And the differentiation is important because androgenetic refers to androgen impact. So your testosterone to your DHT, dihydrotestosterone conversion. There's so much more at play in women than just testosterone and DHT. For example, many women are ferritin deficient. So we
Right.
have enough iron to maintain and to not become anemic, but our
Right.
red blood cells are going to win that battle 100% of the time because what's more important? Oxygenating our organs or having fabulous hair. The body's smart, right? So I do a lot of checking on ferritin, and I often find that a woman's ferritin levels, especially if she's still, menstruating, even irregularly, are below 40. And that's still technically within the normal range of ferritin levels. But truly, if you dip below 50, you're going to lose your hair and you're going to really struggle to regain it. So paying attention to that is key. Vitamin D levels. I mean, dermatologists are responsible for a lot of vitamin D deficiency out there, right?
Oh,
Because we want everyone to protect their skin from the sun. Well, vitamin D is an important component of healthy hair growth, and we need to be monitoring for that. And a lot of women in my practice are vitamin D deficient and
okay.
benefit. The way that blood flow shifts over time to the scalp. So, using treatments like minoxidil, whether it's topical or low dose oral minoxidil, I do quite a bit of that for women. As the androgen balance changes, testosterone is important, a component to talk about. Not that our levels get too high, because we know women's testosterone levels start to more gradually decline as we age. But as the estrogen really takes a dive, the testosterone takes the microphone, and
Right.
that can create more of an impact on the scalp. So when it's appropriate to mitigate that with treatments like spironolactone, we do. So there are a lot of options out there, but it's multifactorial and it's never just one thing.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned all of those. And you're absolutely right with the ferritin. So I had been anemic for the lion's share of my life. And somehow my doctor, yes, under 40, it just wasn't an issue. Oh, you're fine. You're just around that 40. But then for many, many years, I was at like a 2 and a 4 and a 6. So super
Yeah.
low. And then when I had the infusions at the hospital, and it bumped it up to over 69, I think. Yeah, my hair started to grow. It started to be thicker. It started to not
Yeah.
fall out so much. So that I'm glad that you brought all of those up. Let's talk about just maybe stress's impact on hair. Like I think back
Yeah.
to my daughter going to university right at the pandemic year, 2020, and having to be, in the dorms and not allowed out of her room basically, and then going to school and was all online. It was very stressful. And her hair didn't start to fall out, but it started to do a very weird thing where it just got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And
Hmm.
we actually, I went to my doctor and he goes, well, what you need to do is just use a really good shampoo. She's probably not using, I'm like, no, that's not it. This is not it. She
Mm-mm.
uses a good shampoo. But it just was crazy how fragile the hair got, and it just got shorter and shorter. And now, 4 years later, she's done school and now it's starting to grow again. And I'm like, is there a relationship there between stress and our hair?
Sure, absolutely. So the anagen phase, our hair really has three primary cycles that we talk about. The anagen phase, which is our healthy growing phase. And then there's this intermediary phase called the catagen phase where it starts to shift. And then there's the telogen phase. Well, the anagen phase and how long a person's hair stays in anagen is really part of how long one can grow her hair. So when you realize that your hair is not able to grow as long as it used to, well, that's because it's reaching the end of its growing healthy anagen phase earlier than it did before.
Mm,
So, a shortening of the hair is correlated with the duration of the anagen phase, how long your hair can grow.
mm,
The other thing that happens with chronic psychological stress or physiologic stress or acute episodes of stress is that the hair cycle shifts prematurely from
ah,
the anagen phase into the telogen phase. So
right.
typically we have around 85 to 90% of our hairs in this healthy anagen phase at all times. And then the remainder are in that telogen phase, which is why it's normal to lose 100 to 150 hairs a day. But that can shift. And all of a sudden, you can have closer to 25 to 50% of your hairs have gone from anagen phase into telogen phase. And that's when that shedding can occur. We saw it a lot after COVID because that was such
Yeah.
a huge physiologic and, frankly, psychologic stress
Yeah.
on
Hmm.
us at the same time. We see it after women have babies. That big
Yeah.
hormonal shift can trigger a telogen effluvium. I see it more and more in younger women,
Yeah.
especially with chronic psychologic stress, where
Mm,
it's like their cortisol levels are just never able to correct.
mm,
That balance is never able to restore. And so the hair just cycles constantly between shedding excessively and getting a little bit better, but then shedding excessively again. And because of that, the hair gets shorter, it gets thinner, and they never really feel like they're getting a break.
mm-hmm. That's interesting because, 15 years ago, we didn't have the social media pressures. And now the young women are so influenced. I mean, we all are, but, there's just this pressure on social media and just for beauty standards that just are somewhat out there and not attainable. So I can see how that, it's interesting culturally what we'll see happen with our body physiologically based on what's happening culturally. I think it's an interesting thing to study. One of the things I wanted to ask about was yes, dry skin in menopause. I have myself been privy to that, and I hadn't been up until this last year, but all of a sudden, dry eyelids, like flaky eyelids, where I was literally, and you're probably going to hate this as a dermatologist, but I would take that little like face shaver and then just kind of flake off some of the the dead
I've
skin
heard
on my
worse.
eyelids. Right. But I'm like, why is it so flaky? But I did find something that helped, and I'm not sure if, again, I'd love just to hear your thoughts on this. This is called Haley Derma. It's a hypochlorous acid and a couple of sprays on fresh, clean skin. And in about 2 weeks, all of that dry skin went away, and I was shocked. Is that a
Right.
good? Yeah.
So, a couple of important points in that question. One is the dryness of skin in perimenopause and menopause. And what's happening there is that we're losing a lot of our hyaluronic acid. So, our cells in our skin, one of the subtypes is called a fibroblast, which produces our collagen and our elastin and is responsible for hyaluronic acid, which is a sugar molecule that binds 1,000 times its weight in water. So, it
Mm.
keeps our skin plump. And it's why it's in so many skincare products, right? Putting hyaluronic on this acid on the skin gives it this fresh drink of water appearance. So we're losing that hyaluronic acid as we lose estrogen and stimulation of its production. And so our skin gets drier and our barrier becomes compromised. The other thing that we lose in that process is we lose our pH of our skin shifts. Sometimes we refer to the skin as having what's called an acid mantle. Well, acidic pH is a low pH, and that pH is really important because that's what's controlling our skin's microbiome. And just
Mm.
like our gut has a microbiome we need to keep in balance, the skin has a microbiome that we need to keep in balance. And when that pH climbs higher and loses the acidity, we get overgrowth of bacteria like Staphylococcus aureus that create inflammation and irritation. Maybe not to the extent of giving you a full-blown staph infection or
Mhm.
impetigo, but your skin feels bad. It's flaky, it's dry. In fact, studies have looked and seen a rise in Staph aureus in the
Mm.
skin that precedes an eczema flare up. We
Oh,
used to think it was the eczema that then made you more vulnerable to staph, but truly it looks more like that staph level is rising, and that's what's responsible for setting off inflammation, flaking, dryness, and itching. So,
okay.
why does your hypochlorous acid spray that you love work? Well, hypochlorous acid is this fantastic, safe skincare component that restores the acidic pH to the skin, and it kills pathogenic bacteria like Staph aureus without leading to antibiotic resistance.
Okay.
So, without even knowing it, you probably did it because it felt great and that's what it was marketed to do. But this
Mhm.
is a product type that really delivers. And
Mhm.
when I have a patient who is rosacea prone, acne prone, dry, irritated skin. The data in the derm literature and wound healing literature really supports the benefits of topical of hypochlorous acid. And I use it all the time. I use it myself in a mist twice a day.
Okay. So it's safe to use ongoing. It doesn't have to be cycled or anything like that.
It does not. It's safe to be used ongoing. It will not cause bacterial resistance, which is what we often worry about in anything that's going to impact bacterial populations on the skin. Now, if you have a totally healthy skin barrier and you don't have acne and you don't have rosacea and you don't have dryness, you don't need to use hypochlorous acid. It's not going to
Yeah.
do anything for you.
Sure.
But if
Sure.
you do have any amount of dryness or inflammation or barrier compromise, it's a beneficial thing that's just very easy to add.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's going to last a long time. I can tell already. It was about $25 for that bottle, but like I said, I sort of used it. The dry skin has gone, and now I'm like, okay, maybe just once a day, just to make sure it stays away.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about just at the end here about sunscreen and what we're doing for our skin to keep it nourished and healthy as the sun is starting to come out. Well, it's not out here. We just had a snowstorm the other day, but it will in the next month or two be coming out for most of us. So let's talk about sun care. What are we doing? What's new, relevant, important to do?
In the United States, the new thing is that fortunately we are hopefully this month going to get a new UVA filter because there are very few effective UVA filters in sunscreens available in the United States, whereas Europe has had them for quite a while. I'm not as familiar with the Canadian market, but that's a new development because what we understand more and more is the importance of guarding against UVB, which are more of the burning rays of the sun,
Right.
and UVA, which are the more deeply penetrating rays that really contribute more to photoaging and contribute to skin cancer development. So
Mm.
really boosting our UVA protection in addition to UVB is front of mind. Also knowing that it can be a cloudy, snowy day, that you also need to be mindful about wearing your sunscreen. I just got back from skiing for our spring break, and we were
Yes.
vigilant about
Yes.
sun protection because gleaming up from the snow and being at altitude, it is very, very important.
I know as a young kid, we just loved spring break skiing. We'd go and just like fry our faces, take our shirts off, our jackets off, tan our, goggle tan. Like, yeah, not now, but back in
Yeah,
the day, yeah, it was very fun to get that spring break tan. Okay, so are we looking for a sunscreen that says and it has active ingredients to protect from UVB and UVA?
the key terminology is broad spectrum. Broad
Okay.
spectrum means that it has protection against UVB and UVA. Bonus points if your sunscreen is tinted, which is probably more appealing for women, although I have some men who use them as well, because
Yep.
that tint is derived from iron oxide, and iron oxide provides you more protection from
Okay.
visible light. And as we are all now on our screens, on our phones and devices, we are bathed in visible light all day long.
Mm.
And there's increasing data showing how that contributes to photoaging, pigmentation, conditions like melasma. So I love a tinted broad spectrum
Okay.
SPF. I generally recommend more of the mineral blocks, the zinc and titanium based. So I say look for the one or two active ingredients, not the list of five. And that's how you know it's a physical sun protection rather than a chemical sun protection. And I truly prefer those because my patients are generally more inflamed, and those physical blockers are more sensitive for compromised skin.
Is there a brand that contains the tinted zinc titanium broad spectrum?
There are many brands that contain those.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
personally, every day I wear one called Epionce. I really like Epionce because it's water resistant for up to 80 minutes. So, it has some durability. So, even when I
Mhm.
was skiing, I felt confident that it was staying on. Elta MD makes some very nice tinted sunscreens that are mineral. Skin Better Science is another brand with a lot of good data behind it, medical grade. Their Sun Better products are mineral and are tinted as well. And then you can
Okay.
find some at the drugstore. You can find some made by Aveeno, made by, Eucerin. So it doesn't have to be something that you pay high-end prices. Protection is what matters the most.
Well said. I love that. I love that there's like, yes, a broad range. Wow, that was so informative. I've got so many notes here. I'm going to have to go back through and just reread, but thank you so much for being my guest today. That was brilliant. Where can people follow you and or work with you? Can you just let us know?
Absolutely. So on Instagram, I am at Dr. Corinne Erickson with one R and two N's. Everyone misspells my name. It's just
Yeah.
a funny thing. And then I have my own podcast that you were a wonderful guest
Yes.
on called The Skin Pause, that's available wherever you get your podcasts.
Excellent. Yes, definitely listen to that. So much great information here today. So thank you so much. Thanks again. And I'll be sure to, yes, follow you for additional information. She puts out great content over on Instagram. So again, those links will be in the show notes below. Make sure you check that out. Now, to all of you, go move daily in your fitness, your wellness, your nutrition, and now in your skincare. And we'll see you all in the next Move Daily Talks.